Greetings and welcome once again to the Gaming Codex, a show right to explain to you all the many terms used to describe video games, the video games industry, and things associated with them. And today's term is that of flow, which according to the general definition is the mental state of operation in which a person performing an activity is fully immersed in a feeling of energized focus, full involvement, and enjoyment in the process of the activity. In essence, flow is characterized by complete absorption in what one does and the resulting loss in one's senses of space and time. So basically playing Worms for the first time or just about any game that's actually the least bit engaging. You lose yourself in the game, but at the same time you will find things that take you out of it. Flow is not just about immersion, it's not just about the world of the game sucking you into it with its beauty, with its lore, with its characters. It's also about what you do in the game. Though technically speaking, it's not something that is limited to video games. It is a fundamental concept of human nature, which was coined by Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi in the year 1975. It's a concept that's been around for ages, but it got the name of flow then, and it is how we refer to it currently. A very important component of flow, of achieving flow, is the activity in which you are actually involved, not being boring as hell. And for that, there needs to be achieved a balance between how good you are at something and how difficult that something is. It even comes with a chart. I don't usually show charts or actual descriptive video in these shows because I'm very lazy, but this one is very important because it basically just tells you pretty much everything you want to know about how the human brain functions when it comes across an activity. For example, if you have very low skill in a certain activity and the activity itself is sort of not challenging, it's downright boring, unless you know of a way in which you can make it interesting for yourself, it's gonna generate apathy. Like, you're just gonna hate it. If you're a bit more knowledgeable, you just get bored with it. If you're really good, like if you can actually have fun with it, it sort of drifts into relaxation. It's sort of what grinding in most MMOs is, in most online video games. You're not really challenged, are you? In games like Destiny, in games like Diablo, and even Path of Exile in some ways if you're playing on lower difficulties, there's just relaxation there because you have a certain set of skills, of personal skills, like you have a knowledge of the subject that is allowing you to just breeze through everything and enjoy yourself. It's relaxing, it's calming. It's like me playing The Settlers 2 on some maps with not overly violent opponents. If the skill rating goes up, but your skill is too low, you're basically going to be worried. It's sort of like playing Dark Souls and not having Estus flasks, and you just beat something up and now you're worried that you're gonna die before you get to the next bonfire because something in a corner is gonna maybe attack you. I mean, you may be able to deal with it, but probably not. Whereas if you were of a higher skill, you would still feel in control. You would be the man. But if you've got like 1 point of life left, no Estus flasks, and you know that the next bonfire is hell of a way away, you're going into anxiety territory. You are starting to sweat. You're starting to feel kind of unpleasant. It's the same thing when you're queuing up for a ranked match in something like League of Legends of Counter-Strike and you're not confident in your own skill. Whereas if you are a bit confident in your own skill, you get a sense of, well, it's arousal according to the chart. Like you're enamored with the concept. You just want more, a bit more. And then when you get a high enough skill rating and a high enough challenge rating together, you enter flow. This is what we're talking about today, basically. It's the idea that you are now completely immersed in the mechanics. You get to the point where you're not thinking about you yourself as a person. You are thinking mainly about this activity, solving it, being completely enraptured by it. It's a feeling that is magnificent to experience, though it does also come with the downside that everybody else that's looking at you while you're experiencing it will just see you staring at a screen blankly and moving your hands around. It's that stare effect, that detached existence from reality that will quite often freak out parents who don't understand that that's what happens to them when they watch their soap operas. Mom. But of course, actually achieving flow requires a bit more effort than just having an activity that requires a lot of skill and the player having that skill. Which leads us into the popular definition. I'm in the zone, and it's great. Flow is often also called the zone, because mentally you are in a certain area that may not be easily achievable in video games unless they have certain criteria associated to their design. For example, what you have to do in the game needs to be clear. If it's obtuse, if you have no idea what you're doing, it doesn't matter how good you are at achieving something, you're not gonna understand what it's about. Then you have to know how you do it. So for example, the game has to accurately portray the method by which you can achieve a task, or at least imply it. So it would be kind of awful if you're fighting a fire-based enemy and the only way to actually beat it would be to set it on fire. Whereas up until then in that game, when you found a fire enemy, you would deal with it using ice. When games do stuff like this, it takes you out of the immersion, not just of the world, but of the mechanics themselves, of the flow. Also sort of like when a game tries to portray the tragedy of a character having to kill deer and then mowing down hundreds of people that just seemingly spawn out of nowhere and just die like lemmings under your bullets. The game must also convey exactly how well you are doing. I believe Cuphead had that problem where it wasn't clear exactly if you were damaging enemies properly. You need to be free from distractions, so if you're in the middle of an activity in the game, like combat for example, or a puzzle, and you get pop-ups of, hey, your friend Master McBlaster asks you to beat his challenge in this thing, or hey, it's DRM time, or have you heard about our Lord and Savior Windows 10 update? Or characters that start spouting off stupid lines in the middle of an activity that just ruins it. Like stuff saying, hey, 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 we're talking about wizards being from the moon, or existing. Or the visuals just being god-awful, like in Vermintide 2. But most of all, the skill required for this activity needs to seem quite high. You need to feel like what you're doing requires you to have a lot of skill, like what you're doing now, that takes effort, that not everybody could do that. You just pulled off a running lariat, crossed into a rising fury and a devil's spin kick, and then you did a backbreaker on someone. That's something that not everybody could do in Oni, like in the span of 3 seconds, which granted not a lot of people can do in Oni. And this has to be paired with the perception of a high degree of challenge, where enemies can just one-shot kill you, or there's so many of them you feel absolutely overwhelmed. The important note here is perception, because now we're getting to the marketing definition. It perfects the recipe of grind. People can be sort of tricked into a false sense of flow. Think about the Batman Arkham games. I mean, the way you're moving as Batman, doing all those amazing attacks, those dodges, those rolls, those somersaults, those amazing moves. You're not doing them, any of them. You're pressing a button at a predefined time. You're prompted to do it. The game is telling you when to do it. You're not doing those moves. It's a canned animation running while you're just basically doing what one of those bird things with the liquid in them that sort of lowers their head from time to time could do. That gives you a perceived high skill, even though there's very little skill involved. Same with the challenge. It shows you a bajillion enemies coming at you. The fact that they can all die if you sneeze on them really diminishes that. But at first it seems like there's a lot of them, like what you're doing, man, that takes work, that takes effort, but it actually doesn't. And the problem with this sense of false flow is that it doesn't last. People see through it, and then they just abandon it because it becomes boring, or they just drift towards apathy. For some it may veer into relaxation, if the game actually allows you to do things that require a higher grade of skill, maybe speedrunning, I don't know. Otherwise the game just becomes boring. But flow becomes out of the question. You're not really playing it anymore because you enjoy it, you're playing it because, I don't know, you're on Skype or on Discord with 4 of your friends and you're just laughing about doing stupid stuff in a game that's otherwise meaningless. May as well be a giant sandbox with no mechanics to it, with just interaction and a physics engine, a basic one. That's not a game anymore, that's a sandbox. Flow is hard to achieve, like actual flow is hard to achieve. So faking it is usually the way to go. That's how you get your destinies, that's how you get your, what they call them now, lifestyle games, where you're expected to have your entire life revolve around that game, which is a stupid concept that we will cover some other time. The important thing to know is that some games do give you actual flow. Games that have sufficiently well-defined mechanics, that are deep enough and well presented enough and require you to have a certain level of understanding of them to be fully enjoyed. You get it in games like Dota, like League of Legends, Counter-Strike, Rainbow Six Siege. You get it in games like Dark Souls 3, because Dark Souls 3 actually has functioning controls on the PC. It took them 3 games to figure it out. 3! But they did. And anxiety and boredom and apathy turn into flow. So closes this edition of the Gaming Codex. Come back next time when we will talk about a brand new subject. Goodbye.